I've always believed that family comes first, no matter how exhausting or thankless it can be. Every week, without fail, I send my parents $700, enough to cover groceries, bills, and anything they couldn't manage on their own. I never complain, never keep score. I just do it because I want them to be comfortable. My mornings start early, juggling getting my child ready for school, making breakfast, and making sure everything is perfect before I leave for work. Evenings are a blur of homework help, dinner, and bedtime stories, trying to balance my job and my responsibilities at home. I thought my dedication spoke for itself, that the small acts of love would show them how much I cared. But over time, the thank yous became rarer, the calls shorter, the smiles less genuine. I realized that no matter how much I gave, I was expected, almost invisible, as if my presence and sacrifices were just background noise. I loved them, yes, but I was beginning to feel like my heart was stretching thin, giving and giving without ever being truly seen or appreciated. And still, I carried on, believing that one day my quiet devotion would matter, that my child would witness the value of love through sacrifice, and that perhaps my parents, too, would notice before it was too late. I had no idea that the moment that would challenge everything I believed in was closer than I thought, quietly approaching with the first hint of a birthday that wasn't going to go as planned. This year, I was determined to make my child's birthday unforgettable. I spent weeks planning every detail, from the themed decorations to the cake, down to the personalized party favors that I knew would make my little one's eyes light up. I called friends, coordinated games, and even picked out a special outfit, imagining the smile on my child's face when they walked into the room. More than anything, I wanted my parents to be there, to see the joy they had helped bring into this world, to feel included in our little celebrations. I sent them a text a week in advance, a simple reminder that the party was on Saturday, a time for laughter and family togetherness. The reply never came. I shrugged it off at first, telling myself they were busy, maybe tired or distracted. As the days passed, my messages went unanswered, and vague excuses trickled in. I might have plans, or we'll see if we can make it. Each non-committal reply gnawed at me, a quiet anxiety I tried to ignore while focusing on making the day special for my child. I rehearsed scenarios in my mind, hoping they would show, picturing their smiles, the hugs, the shared laughter. But beneath the excitement, a small, persistent worry started to grow. That my parents, the people I had devoted so much to, might not prioritize this moment at all. I tried to push it aside, focusing on the colorful balloons and neatly wrapped gifts, telling myself it didn't matter, that the party's magic would shine regardless. But the shadow of disappointment was already stretching across my carefully planned day. The morning of the party was filled with excitement. I could hear my child's laughter echoing through the house as they ran around, pointing at the balloons and the decorations I had spent hours arranging. Friends began to arrive, bringing gifts and energy that made the house feel alive. I checked my phone again, hoping for a text, a call, anything from my parents. Nothing. By mid-morning, it became painfully clear. They weren't coming. My heart sank in a way I hadn't expected, and a heavy weight of disbelief and hurt settled in my chest. How could they ignore this? I had given them so much over the years, every week, every sacrifice, every quiet favor without complaint. I felt exposed, humiliated in front of everyone who mattered to me, forced to smile and play the gracious host while my own family chose to be absent. The laughter around me felt sharper somehow, highlighting the silence where they should have been. I caught myself glancing at the door repeatedly, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, they would walk in late, apologetic and smiling. But that hope dwindled quickly, replaced by a bitter ache of rejection. My child noticed my forced smile and squeezed my hand, sensing my unease. I wanted to cry, to scream, to ask why, but the words caught in my throat. I realized that no amount of money or devotion could guarantee their care, and that realization cut deeper than any hurt I had felt before. By the end of the day, the party had wound down, but the emptiness left by my parents' absence felt unbearable. I picked up my phone and called them, my hands trembling slightly, trying to steady my voice. "Why didn't you come?" I asked, forcing calm into words that felt jagged in my chest. There was a pause on the other end, a faint sigh, and then a dismissive, flippant reply. "We were busy. You know how it is. Busy?" I felt my throat tighten, disbelief mixing with anger. I reminded them of the texts, the planning, the week I had spent coordinating every detail for my child's happiness. Their tone didn't change. If anything, they sounded more superior, more unconcerned, as if my sacrifices were meaningless. "It's just a birthday," my father said casually. "We can't make every little thing." My chest burned, humiliation and frustration rising together. All those weeks of sending money, checking in, helping with bills, going above and beyond, it was invisible, trivialized. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they'd done, to realize that their absence left a wound far bigger than a missed party. But they just shrugged it off, leaving me holding the hurt alone, grappling with the sharp sting of betrayal while they acted untouchable, untethered to any responsibility. Their disregard wasn't just negligence, it was a subtle assertion of superiority. A reminder that no matter how much I gave, they believed they could take without consequence. As I hung up, memories flooded me like a relentless tide. I remembered the evenings I stayed late at work just to cover their bills, the weekends I spent driving them to appointments, the countless dinners I prepared when they claimed to be too tired. I recalled the holidays I postponed, the little luxuries I denied myself, all to make sure they had what they needed. And now, after everything I had given them, they had abandoned my child's birthday without a second thought. My chest tightened, and a bitter question repeated in my mind. After all I gave them, how could they? Tears threatened to spill, but anger began to rise alongside the hurt, a fiery resolve that refused to be ignored. For the first time, I let myself imagine a different reality, one where their choices didn't dictate my happiness, where I held the power to protect myself and my child from this repeated neglect. It was a quiet, almost imperceptible shift, but in that moment of raw emotion, a seed of empowerment was planted, hinting that the next steps wouldn't just be about surviving their indifference. They would be about reclaiming control. Sitting alone that evening, I realized I couldn't let this slide. Every ounce of hurt and betrayal had hardened into determination. I refused to remain the passive child who gave endlessly while being ignored and dismissed. Quietly, I began researching ways to regain control, ways to ensure that my parents would finally see the consequences of their neglect. I searched online forums, read stories of emotional justice, and took notes on creative ways people had confronted similar betrayals. Each idea sparked another, and I imagined scenarios where they couldn't ignore or belittle me anymore. Small reversals at first, building towards something unmistakable. My mind raced with possibilities, but I kept them hidden, carefully considering each step, weighing risks and rewards. The suspense of my secret planning filled me with a strange thrill, a sense of anticipation that was entirely mine. For the first time in years, I felt like the architect of my own story, no longer subject to their whims. I would make them notice, and they wouldn't be able to dismiss it. Every whispered idea, every hidden note, was a step toward reclaiming not just my dignity, but my power. I couldn't carry this alone anymore, so I reached out to those I trusted most. Over coffee with my closest friend, I recounted every detail: the skipped birthday, the dismissive excuses, the years of unseen sacrifices. "I don't know how they can be so blind," my friend said, her eyes wide, voice tight with anger. I nodded, relief washing over me as she continued. "You've given them everything. You don't deserve this." Hearing someone acknowledge my pain, validate my feelings, was like a weight lifting off my chest. Later that evening, I spoke to my spouse, pacing the living room, words spilling out. "I can't keep letting them treat us this way. It's not just the birthday, it's everything." My spouse squeezed my hand firmly. "Then we fix it. We make them see. They can't ignore you anymore." Their support lit a fire inside me, tiny sparks forming into plans I dared not yet reveal. Together, we whispered possibilities and imagined scenarios where their arrogance would meet consequences, where my child and I could reclaim what had been dismissed. Seeds of revenge and empowerment were sown in these conversations, and for the first time, I felt the quiet thrill of control, knowing that my next steps would be deliberate, unstoppable, and entirely my own. The next week, I started testing the waters. asserting control in ways I hadn't dared before. I paused my regular payment, leaving them to realize that I wasn't an endless source of support. When they called, I kept my tone calm but firm, refusing to answer their guilt-tripping or passive-aggressive remarks. At first, they seemed confused, maybe even offended, but I stayed steady, feeling a quiet satisfaction every time I held my ground. I began dropping subtle surprises, too, inviting friends over for casual gatherings they weren't expecting, leaving little hints that life went on without waiting for their approval. Small gestures, like attending a weekend event without them, or quietly celebrating my child's accomplishments with close family and friends, gave me a taste of empowerment. For the first time, I noticed a shift in their behavior. They hesitated, paused, and even tried to insert themselves back into conversations where they were no longer central. Each tiny reversal fueled me, showing that my choices mattered, that their neglect no longer had the power to dominate my life. I realized that reclaiming authority didn't require grand gestures yet, just consistency, patience, and a refusal to bend to their arrogance. Every little act of control was a quiet victory, a warning that the tide had begun to turn. By the following week, I had a plan taking shape, one that would leave no room for their dismissive arrogance. I chose the upcoming family gathering, a casual dinner where everyone would be present, as the stage. I meticulously mapped out how the night would unfold, imagining their expressions as my quiet control unraveled years of ignored sacrifices. Every detail mattered. The timing of my arrival, the placement of my child, the subtle ways I would reveal what they had missed. I remembered the countless birthdays, holidays, and small moments I had sacrificed for them, the endless evenings spent catering to their needs while they barely acknowledged mine. That memory fueled my focus. Then, I had been powerless, invisible. Now I would be in control, orchestrating a subtle, inescapable spotlight on their neglect. As the night approached, suspense coiled tight within me, a mixture of anticipation and fear. Would they show up? Would they act defensively? Or would they finally confront the consequences of their choices? I rehearsed conversations in my head, visualized reactions, and even considered contingencies if they tried to weasel out. Every imagined moment heightened the tension, each scenario a hook designed to keep me, and eventually everyone else, on edge. The contrast between the girl who had once quietly absorbed humiliation and the woman who now wielded deliberate power was stark, almost electric. And in that quiet planning, the first true taste of impending justice began to settle into my chest, a thrilling promise that the night would finally tilt in my favor. The night of the gathering arrived, and I had everything set perfectly, every detail orchestrated to show my child's joy and subtly highlight what my parents had missed. I had organized a small, elegant celebration at a venue they wouldn't have expected, complete with decorations, music, and a cake designed to make my child's eyes sparkle with excitement. And then there was the helicopter, a bold, unmistakable statement, landing just as guests were arriving, something I had quietly arranged to ensure the moment would leave a mark. My child laughed, pointing at the landing, completely oblivious to the tension it would create. I greeted friends and family with warmth, letting them enjoy the moment, while knowing my parents' reactions would be impossible to ignore. When they walked in, expecting a simple, ordinary gathering, their eyes widened, disbelief etched on their faces. Every glance, every whisper, every subtle nod from friends and family underscored the contrast. Then, I had been powerless, desperate for acknowledgement. Now, I commanded attention, orchestrating a lavish scene of celebration that they had no role in. The energy was electric, anticipation brimming as my parents slowly realized they were missing the joy they had once taken for granted. It was not just a birthday. It was a statement, a carefully crafted display that announced a shift in control, a reminder that the people who had ignored and dismissed my sacrifices were no longer the center of my life. And in the midst of laughter, music, and the glowing faces of my child and friends, I felt a deep satisfaction knowing the stage was set for the reckoning to come. When my parents finally arrived, they moved through the crowd with the casual confidence of people expecting the ordinary. A simple dinner, a few polite smiles, nothing to challenge their self-importance. But the moment they stepped into the room, the energy shifted. My child ran forward, laughing, arms full of gifts and balloons, radiating happiness that had been carefully nurtured in their absence. Friends and family were already gathered, subtly aware of the evening's purpose, exchanging knowing glances. I greeted them warmly, guiding them through a space that was as celebratory as it was symbolic. The cake bore my child's name in bold, shimmering letters, and every detail, from personalized party favors to the carefully orchestrated music, spoke of planning and effort they had ignored. I casually mentioned my child's recent achievements, awards, school accomplishments, projects completed with dedication. Then, in the most understated but cutting way, I revealed the helicopter landing, the carefully arranged decorations, the luxurious touches they had dismissed in my texts. Their faces paled, a mixture of shock and embarrassment, as murmurs of admiration and surprise rippled through the room. I held myself steady, calm, letting the silent judgment of everyone present emphasize the contrast. They had been dismissive, invisible, and entitled. Now, they were witnessing what their neglect had cost them. I could see it in their eyes. The realization that years of taking for granted, of acting superior, had left them powerless in this moment. It was public, undeniable, and deeply satisfying, a reversal that finally balanced the scales of respect, recognition, and moral authority. Every glance, every whispered reaction reinforced that the shift was complete. They could no longer ignore me, and the power I had quietly reclaimed was now on full display. Their eyes darted around the room, catching the expressions of friends and family, realizing for the first time the weight of their neglect. We didn't know it would be like this, my mother stammered, voice barely audible over the hum of conversation. My father's jaw tightened, words failing him as he took in the lavish setting, the laughter, the undeniable joy radiating from my child. I held my ground, letting the silence speak as much as my words would. "You missed my child's birthday," I said calmly, letting each word land with precision, despite knowing every detail. "You chose to be absent, dismissive, and uncaring. And now here it is. Your absence has never been more visible." The room seemed to lean in, friends nodding subtly, eyes fixed on the awkward tension that had replaced the casual confidence they had carried in. Their shoulders slumped under the weight of social judgment, embarrassment painting their faces a shade deeper than mere guilt. I felt a rush of vindication, a profound satisfaction that all the sacrifices, the ignored calls, the silent devotion, had led to this moment of karmic clarity. All those weeks, all the support I gave, it wasn't invisible. It just didn't matter to you. I continued, voice steady yet charged with emotion. But today it does. Today, everyone sees exactly what you chose to ignore. My parents exchanged glances, defeated, humbled, while I stood tall, fully aware of the moral balance now restored. Every small act, every calculated move had brought us to this moment, where justice wasn't just imagined, it was witnessed. I let myself smile, quietly reveling in the internal satisfaction, the sweet payoff that years of patience and silent endurance had finally yielded. After the initial shock faded, and the guests drifted into casual conversation, I found a quiet moment with my child, brushing a stray lock of hair from their smiling face. Watching their happiness, their laughter, I felt a deep sense of relief and pride. This was the life I had protected, the joy I had nurtured despite the neglect I had endured. My parents sat quietly across the room, subdued, their earlier arrogance replaced by a tentative humility that spoke volumes. I reflected on the lessons the day had forced me to confront. The importance of setting boundaries, of valuing my own efforts, and of recognizing that my worth was not tied to their approval. For years, I had measured love through sacrifice, hoping it would earn acknowledgement. But now I understood that true empowerment came from asserting control over my own life, not waiting for others to validate it. My child's happiness had become both a shield and a reward, a reminder that my energy and care had real impact. I felt bittersweet satisfaction, knowing the confrontation had changed the dynamic irreversibly, but also mourning the time lost to their disregard. And yet, amid the lingering tension, there was clarity. I had learned to stand firm, to honor my contributions, and to protect those I loved most. The day had been a reckoning, a victory wrapped in lessons of resilience and self-respect, leaving me with a quiet confidence that nothing could undermine the power I had reclaimed. In the weeks that followed, I established new boundaries that felt firm but fair, making it clear to my parents that respect and presence were no longer optional. They were essential. I continued supporting my child, celebrating milestones, and sharing joy, but I did so with confidence and intention, no longer seeking approval or validation from those who had previously ignored us. My parents, now fully aware of the consequences of their neglect, approached interactions with caution and a newfound humility, and while our relationship wasn't perfect, it had shifted toward mutual recognition and accountability. I felt lighter, empowered by the knowledge that I could assert my worth without guilt, that my sacrifices could be honored in ways I chose, not merely expected. Watching my child thrive, surrounded by love and attention, I realized that reclaiming control had strengthened not only my voice, but our family's foundation. The lesson was clear. Love and devotion are invaluable, but so is self-respect. By asserting boundaries, embracing my power, and demanding accountability, I had created a healthier, happier dynamic, one where respect, recognition, and joy were no longer gifts to be begged for, but natural outcomes of valuing ourselves and each other.